Continuing with the floppy hosting of the four-dimensional viewing of the timeline. The timeline of the Pharaoh Abraxas I, aka Stephen Eric Prellwitz. The character and destiny of the individual are shown in the timeline, and the whole thing as a pattern defines who you are, where you've been, where you're going. So for me, as I was elaborating, let's see, if I got rid of that light, it'd be better. No, that's worse. Okay, just fumbling about with my lighting.
Do you want the torch?
No, I don't want the torch. Here we go. I just have to get the correct viewing. There it is. Okay. Close up on the nucleus, we could say, which is the beginning of my cosmic journey, which begins with meeting Ross on June 6th of 1984 in the park, Westerly, Rhode Island, and the Peter the Great obsession forming a pattern for what would become the Abraxas mythos, even though the Abraxas word was not even uttered at that point. It was all under the Tsar's mythos. There was no mention of Abraxas in the beginning.
So
and
the Tsar was Abraxas, essentially?
Yeah, Peter the Great's, he didn't use Abraxas per se, he used Janus, the Roman god Janus, as the god of gods, the god with two faces, as opposed to the double-headed bird. And in the Abraxas mythos that Carl Jung defined, with the Abraxas being the synthesis of opposites, essentially, you see a much clearer Peter the Great stamp there than had been apparent before.
Is it also the double-headed bird kind of a twin flame symbol?
Twin flame, yes it is.
It is?
Sure it is. Because, here we go, that's the way to do it. Come up at it. Look at that.
That's nice.
That is nice. So, yes it is, and that would be the latest form of this. That's what they have, the alchemical hermaphrodite, where it's the king and queen, the two heads of the person.
Yeah. That's
where we're at now. In the beginning, this symbol was of the double-headed bird, representing power and knowledge. Okay, in 1985, on February 7th, is the bloody death of Christina, who had been my first love, and that shocking, terrible event was actually engineered by Ross to create access to a second timeline and a disposable reality where he could safely contact the cosmic figures, beginning with Kaimane. And this reality he created, essentially, for his own purposes, would end up later, causing a chain of events leading into the cosmic cult, Nuog, and other things. But at this point, in 1985, it was about me going crazy and having contact with my own Janus effect of my alternate reality self, the self indigenous to the second timeline underneath the main one. That second self, his name is Kang, named after a comic book character from Marvel Comics from the Fantastic Four, who was an alternate reality version of Doctor Doom, in fact. And here, just briefly, interestingly enough, we see the first idea I ever had of like a hyperspace concept in the form of this map, which was delivered to me in a strange moment of cosmic intuition when at the time I was only having these weird contacts with Kang. I was not having really interactions with Kaimane or the cosmic figures. That had lasted only for a brief period in the early 85, late 84, 85, during my first phase. And then it was nothing cosmic figure related, it was astral travel related. And this map is my first attempt to understand the whole world of dimensions that was being accessed. and we see it has like a tree structure, and flowing upwards is linear time. The present would be the main body of the tree. The upper branches here. To the left, you have a spiral representing the dream cycle or the dream meditation, or whatever you get into meditatively, which releases your astral body to float down to the roots of the tree, which is where the so-called astral planes are. And then you eventually return back up to where you began in your body on the trunk. However, if you go off to the right, you end up in the void, and possibly you can't make it back because you weren't prepared to be in the void, and too bad for you. And the top leads to the next reality. It was already, because of my contact with alternate realities here, I already had the model for parallel universes. Therefore, that top of the tree is just a crude way of saying there's a door to the next reality, whatever it may be. For me, that door was through the multiple personality break, psychotically caused by the trauma of the murder scene. But for other people, it's other things. You know, for example, in the world of the multiple personality through sexual abuse, traumatic events cause a person to actually open up into another alternate reality where the events didn't happen, and therefore they have a rotating door where they're contacting other versions of themselves. For me, with Kang, it was a similar scenario, and we had a rotating door back and forth between our two realities. However, I was just learning how to drive in late 86 rather, early 87. I got my first car, which we see here, crudely represented. And on one particular night,
That's cute.
one particular night, I drove home safely. Kang, however, had a few more beers than I did and crashed and died. That's why he goes off the road into the X, the deadly X. And you see now the Janus face is me and the skull instead of me and Kang, Steve and Kang. Mm-hmm. It's now Steve and Kang with his crossbone, skull and crossbones. All right, and then 87 is the year G represents Greg Dulce, who I met in 1987. I also met Jeff DeReamer at that time, and that would be the beginning of me as the guru, more or less. You know, cosmically speaking, I was getting drawn in also through my time at the hut where I was working. I met the witches, and you know, Wanda and Serena and Wanda are the two witches here. See, we have a theme. You'll notice in the iconography of this timeline, I have a little heart, for example, here with Christina, right? The C, and then the broken, bleeding heart when she dies. With the witches here, I have just the outline of a heart because it wasn't deeply romantic. It was just quasi-romantic with Serena, and that drew me into the scene with Wanda. Nothing romantic about that. She was the evil mistress, you know. So they were like the dark and light witches, and that's just the S&M theme right there.
But you learned a lot from them.
I did learn a lot from them. That's what I had the secret training in the Cunnilingus. Oh, and they would do the secret rituals. You know, terrible things happened, but you know, that was a good distraction for me. That whole world, it was, you know, cosmic in the sense that they, you know, Wanda and Serena both were doing, you know, magical goddess invocations, let's say. It was my first encounter with the realm of the mothers. But they were small scale, small time. They were doing their own little cult type scenario. And, you know, they would be like a parallel to the Nuog scene as well. Both of them involved peripherally. And the witches' cult was kind of like happening alongside our cult. In a strange way. Cults everywhere in Rhode Island of the late 80s, early 90s. Strangely enough, and I don't even know why that was. There was a satanic panic in the 80s as well. And it's almost like the propaganda mill of the Illuminati Jews, who make the popular consciousness. They wanted people to make cults.
Yeah, stirring up the pot.
And we know that the CIA, for example, specifically engineered several cults, including Jim Jones and the People's Temple. Okay, so anyway, my cult may or may not have been part of that same type of diffusion of consciousness. But anyway, so in '87, Greg and I meet, and we have the golden period of, me telling him cosmic tales. I was kind of like the mentor, teaching him how to break away from socialized thinking, because he was very socialized and the good little boy, Catholic boy, proper academic, never did anything wrong. Quite a contrast to who he would later become. But at that time, I was the mentor, trying to be Ross to him almost, and that's why when I first gave him, the stories of what my impressions of the cosmic had been, it sucked him in. But he didn't want my version; he wanted Ross's version, right? Because Greg and Ross had something in common, and that was lust for power for its own sake. Okay? And I was not. I was more about the knowledge. Because going back here to the Tsar's formula, the two sides of the bird's head, one is the material kingdom, the Tsar's power to rule the world militarily, essentially, bureaucratically. And then the other head is the priest or the pope or the papacy, the religious kingdom, the Tsar's right as God's incarnation to rule the afterlife. Right? And so the knowledge represents the priestly God aspect, whereas the military dark power is almost like the satanic aspect, if you look at it, okay? And both Greg and Ross were interested in that side. I was interested in the knowledge side, which is ultimately what saved me, in my opinion, from falling into the traps that destroyed both of them.
That's very good.
Yes. Okay, so Ross's ultimate power scheme was executed in '88 when he engineered a series of events leading to him becoming a vampire by having Kymane unwittingly assist him. See, Kymane and Ross had been bitter enemies for a while, and Ross had fucked over Kymane in various ways, and Kymane was looking for vengeance, so Ross gave him the opportunity for vengeance through us, ironically enough, because Greg and I in '87 had begun contacting Kymane, and we had fallen into a trap Ross had essentially engineered, wherein Kymane would be given new power via Greg and I in our proto-cult scenario, Greg, Jeff, and I at that point, and feed Kymane, give him the power that he would then use against Ross. However, what no one knew, except Ross, is that Ross wanted Kymane to attack him, because he wanted his astral cord severed, because only by having his astral cord severed could Ross escape his body and possess an innocent third party, turn that person's body into a vampire and achieve his power scheme, which was here, the vampire. So that's exactly what happened. On October 18th, 1988, Greg and I, working under Kymane's orders, supposedly, so we thought, against Ross's interests, betraying him. We were so treacherous. But fuck him, because Ross never did us any favors, really. He used us, and then if we benefited, that's fine, but he was never planning for us to benefit. And so, anyway, we gave him what he deserved, but ultimately, because he was such a duplicitous bastard, it's what he wanted anyway, and he managed to get the vampire body as a result. However, ironically, it turned out that the vampire body was not what he intended, and he was tortured and tormented and miserable as a vampire. And so he gave up his vampire body completely, and we don't know, no one knows what happened or what the full details are. That's why it's the question mark. What we do know is that our cosmic cult scenario began to develop, and Ross essentially was resurrected from the grave, let's say, because, alright, when he had died, so we thought, in '88, his body went into a coma. His spirit at that point had gone to possess somebody else and become a vampire. Meanwhile, his body vegetates and dies. So he's dead, he's trapped, he's committed to the vampire body, right? But it's a hell, it's torment. He's really not what he bargained for. So what he does is he cuts a deal with what would essentially be the elder gods of the Lovecraftian ilk, gods connected to Kymane, of course, who offer to free him from the limbo hell of the vampire body if he will do their bidding and essentially be their bitch for a period of like 2 years at that point. Well, he gets about 2 months into that and realizes he can't take it, so he has to escape. So what does he do? He starts knocking on our door and manipulating us again, and that creates the Nuog scenario. Ross's primary purpose in creating Nuog was to free himself from the deal he had to make with the Elder Gods to escape his failed vampire agenda. But for us, the Nuog scenario was a full-on confrontation with cosmic figures, great and small, from various plot levels, all brought in under a superstructure of madness. But just briefly, before I get totally into that, in '89, while all this vampire crap was going on with Ross, I met Allison Musha, who had become my first fiancée, and she and I had the romantic involvement, and she would be my, essentially my Guinevere to my Arthur for the Camelot scene of Nuog. Greg would eventually be in the Lancelot role, of course. But here we see this, again, the double-faced imagery. What this is in 1989, we did a play. I was in drama, of course. Did the play The Summoning of Avery Mann, and I played Death, and in that I had the double face, because Death is both black and white, and Death would be the messenger god who goes in between God and Satan. And that's what my role was, right? And I was so impressive I won the award, and that's where I got the scholarship to Boston University, which ironically Allison was going to anyway, and she was in the crowd, and that's how I won her over. But I resisted that. I pulled back. I resisted the college plan because I knew I had a cosmic college in the form of my cult that I had to create, and I didn't have time for the mundane. But so just briefly here, looking at the symbolism, you notice how the RR is underneath that. Around that time, Ross was resurrected through his deal with the Elder Gods, and this arrow leading up to the P is the period of time he had to suffer in their astral hell, sucking their dicks, five-dimensionally speaking, whatever what I don't even want to know what was happening. But finally, through the events that were going on at Nuog, he managed to free himself, and P was the Prince connection. He did it through the Prince plot level, unbelievably. And the whole details of Prince and his music and how it was the strange parallel to Nuog. I mean, I can't even begin to go into all that at this point. Way too much information. But Abraxas appears for the first time here, because at that point, that's when we first read Hermann Hesse's Demian, and we first began to understand Abraxas as the god of gods, and the two snakes who are his legs are the light and dark forces. The whip is the power, the shield is the reflection or the knowledge, and he has the rooster head because he is the awakening of the new dawn. And also during Nuog, you see this X, which connects to this X here of Kang's aborted reality. Why? Because Al-Anon, druid figure from the future who became kind of ringleader during Nuog, had the ability to stitch time, let's say, and he restored the parallel reality so that it was as if Kang had never died. And we now had two realities rotating back and forth during the Nuog period. And we had two doorways, one in the bathroom at Nuog downstairs, one in the bathroom of the IHOP, located not far away, the International House of Pancakes. It was a restaurant 24 hours, where the chart was born, amongst other things. The chart, here we see outlined with the green boxes, is the summation of our knowledge, cosmically speaking, as a result of the cult. Because during the Nuog cult, we had contact with all these different cosmic figures, and they all add up to essentially a spectrum that can be synthesized and perceived as this 28 boxes that we then perceived as the chart, per se. And as we sit and contemplate just for a moment here, I'm just going to pull back, and I'd like you just to take the camera just for a minute. I have to get the big extension cord so I can continue.
Can we pause that?
No, we can't pause because it'll start another video, I think. So can you just maybe hold it so it's floating over the timeline at that point, maybe zoom in a little bit, and I'll be right back. I love you.
I love you.
Maybe make a little comment. Doesn't matter what it is. Nothing wrong or right.
I think I like this half better than this half.
Which half do you like better?
The second half.
It's more ordered.
This one's kind of chaos and very male oriented. And this one's very female. And balanced at the end.
It is very chaotic and male-oriented, which was the initial ego level.
Yeah, it's very Steve Prowett.
It's about my personal ego, essentially.
Yeah.
Whereas the half after that is about the goddess serving the goddess, etc., which we'll get to momentarily. But, you know, the whole cosmic search for power and knowledge that was the theme of that early period, that's good. I mean, it's the essentials you have to go through first. And then you evolve into understanding things more, and now you're about the goddess, etc. You know? So you have to be masculine and egotistical and limited before you can embrace the unlimited beauty of the goddess.
Poppy, you're so wise.
I am.
Yeah.
Well, I try to be. Okay, so let me get a sip of my water. And then I shall continue. Oh, yeah. Our camera is wonderful. Okay, hold it still, please. While There we go. Now, as I was saying, give my hand a rest too. I can see how that's terrible, you know. You really get the cramp. Okay, continuing with the timeline, we had a little break at Nuog, which is appropriate since it was the defining moment of my life for all the years afterwards. You know, once you commit yourself to a cosmic cult and you're really living it for real and you're invested and your whole world suddenly explodes, you have to really be committed and you have to cast aside doubt, cast aside a lot of considerations, and you are changed forever as a result, and you never can go back to society. No matter what. You can impersonate a member of society, like I do at work every day, but you're never back there. Okay, so the D here, underneath Abraxas, represents Demian by Hermann Hesse. Okay, and this is the theme you'll see with the iconography. We saw the A, R, Z over here, Amber novels of Roger Zelazny. A, and I put the RZ as well because it's also other books by Zelazny, primarily Creatures of Light and Darkness. Positing infinity, the rest is easy. That all-important quote. Now, the D is Demian by Hermann Hesse. GBG, which you can see next to it, is the Glass Bead Game by Hermann Hesse. And that was the first real approaching the chart in action concept, because in that book he has a really good musical harmony of life, game of life concept, and that influenced our development of the chart afterwards. But Nuog came to a close in December of 1990 with what we term the Amber War, which played out in various planes of reality and had a long, terrible, complex history. It was a attempt to hijack the fabric of reality perpetrated by villains from Nuog, primarily Hania, the evil renegade Syrian magician, and Xandor, the Time Lord gone bad. He was kind of like a Doctor Who Time Lord figure. They attempted to destroy the primary pattern of reality and redraw it in their own image, and we stopped them because it was that or be their bitch forever. And so the Amber War came to an end and destroyed essentially the cosmic cult. All of our friendships and relationships were destroyed. You can see here the heart breaking with a lightning strike, And that was the destruction of everything I loved at that time, including my relationship with Allison. And then Nuog ran its course completely with the Amber War peddling out, and it was a schism. You see here a lightning strike schism of realities. We started off in Reality 1 and 2, running simultaneously. Then Reality 1 was destroyed during the Amber War, leaving us in Reality 2. But then Reality 3 was opened up as a result of Reality 1 being destroyed. So we're in Realities 2 and 3. But then both of those came to a shocking conclusion on June 6th of 1991, when finally the old cosmic events came to a close and the first set of plates were destroyed. Our cosmic plates had been created in 1990 when the chart was created as our magical tools for manipulating reality. And we had to destroy them on June 6th of 91 in order to prevent being trapped in a reality that was under threat and actually was being destroyed by forces we had unleashed unwittingly. It's a long, terrible story. Moral of the story is, you don't want to play with higher dimensional beings when you don't know what the agendas in play are, and you don't know who's who or why, because so many cult scenarios that you're being lied to, you don't even know it, and you just assume that these characters are who they say they are, and then you find out they're not, but it's too late and it doesn't matter because you already gave up all your power. It's terrible. Okay, so anyway, after all that, in 1992, I kind of took an approach of academic studying of the cosmic. 91 and 92 were bridged by WR, which is World Realities, which was another venture of the cosmic that I had kind of started, then abandoned, and then was picked up and continued by Mike, Greg, and Warren. And it was an attempt to turn the chart concepts into essentially a Millennium Group style consulting type of firm, which also ended up trying to produce cosmic T-shirts, which would be sold and would be infiltrating the unconscious of the populace unawares.
You're kidding me.
I'm not kidding you.
Wow.
They actually did print up some of the T-shirts. And that's actually during World Realities period, we were running up against our first bumping up of the cosmic collective plots in the form of the government conspiracy that was trying to shut them down because they couldn't let the T-shirts get out. Or whatever, A lot of weed was smoked, of course. So, who knows who was who or what. But anyway, while they were doing that, I was out of the picture because I'd had a falling out.
What were they trying to consult though, using the
One thing was using the power of the cosmic chart and the cosmic synchronicity to obtain world-shattering events, like a cure for AIDS was one example. Through they perform a cosmic ritual with their second version of the plates. The next day, coincidentally, they come across a guy who has a controversial cure for AIDS. The day after that, they get a chauffeur job where they end up driving Magic Johnson. As Magic Johnson's in the car driving with them, he's talking about how he's just been diagnosed with AIDS, and it becomes the big story. And so there's like a reality warping effect that was going on. And in response to that reality warping, the idea was that the Hoover plot, they called it Hoover as in J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI. We didn't know about the Illuminati at that point, of course. The Hoover plot would be responding, trying to shut them down. And of course, the reality quickly imploded after only a few months. But it set the pattern for a California parallel track that we would initiate back and forth between Rhode Island and California, because World Realities took place in California. Okay, so I was in Rhode Island in 92 anyway, while they were in California. And the S in the heart here represents Samantha, spoiled princess, LSD freak, who I met at the library of University of Rhode Island when she was researching the genetic code, and I was researching the chart in relation to the genetic code. So we had sharing a table one day at the library, and I had my chart madness all out on the table, and I was just an irresistible force, I suppose. But she was the classic redhead figure for me for years afterwards. But a rich, spoiled bitch who I ultimately could not stand. And the writing here, QP, is the study of quantum physics, okay? Right? And the books PU and EQ. PU is Parallel Universes by Dr. Fred Allen Wolf, that guy from What the Bleep We Know. And EQ is his other book, even more important, The Eagle's Quest, which is where he took a worldwide tour of all these in the hills shamans from, like, you know, the Amazon to Siberia to New Mexico, and he essentially got all their cosmic material and then used a quantum physics model to try to explain an overall meta model of how cosmic channeling could occur using quantum physics and the willpower magically, quote unquote, which is what we had been doing in Nuog, right? And the book Parallel Universes, which was his book before Eagle's Quest, I had got at the Pyramid bookstore in Salem, Massachusetts, which is the witch haven, when I was with Rick, the Cosmic Master, who was one of those Legions of Light New Age characters that we had met during Nuog. Met him actually at the monastery, where I almost became a monk. Yes, in early '92, I almost became the monk, right? Because I was so burned out by the cosmic, I had somewhere to hide for a while. In '91 also, at first I tried to hide in the army after all the cosmic burnout, right? In late '91. And that didn't work, but it ended up setting me on the pattern of being free economically from society because of the army nerve gas experiment, fallout, etc., etc. I essentially, by going into the army, thinking that I was actually going to end up serving Uncle Sam and going somewhere, maybe the Middle East. Iraq was still, had just happened at that point. Iraq won. I end up disappearing from society as a result. Completely removed, right? And put on a path of, with the government money of just not having to enter into society at all and being totally free to pursue the cosmic research, etc., that would lead me to where I am now.
So back to the book?
The book.
That you got at
Parallel
the
Universes.
store?
I got that book, and it really set me up because Fred Wolf defines a whole bunch of rules to the game, and he also starts to go into the rules of rule making, which is what he really elaborated on in Eagle's Quest, because the Parallel Universes book establishes the rules. But Eagle's Quest, with the shamans manipulating the rules, you get into the rules of rule making and how to change the parameters of your reality. Transformation of consciousness is the only game in town. That's the big quote from that book. Okay? So anyway, what we have here in 1993 then is the return to California of Greg and I, and the A represents the A team of Greg, Warren, Mike, and I, and the return, this is the world realities, which have been destroyed and severed, yet was kind of still half alive until the A team, which was the final version of it, would have worked as well if not for the shocking destruction of that reality, shadow storm, caused by many things, including Mike going insane. The 7D here represents the 7 days a week experiment, which I was doing in '93, where I was channeling 7 different cosmic figures, one each day, right? While I disappeared entirely into the unconscious and was trying to manipulate the levers of the unconscious, right?
What?
Yeah, for about two or 3 weeks I had it going solid, but events drew me out of it, of course. During that period, of course, now the CR is the resurrection of Christina, which occurred. Christina, who had been killed over here, had been, dead, but a ghost lingering, trying to right the wrongs that Ross had been perpetrating. And she eventually got some time kind of running the cosmic scene of the 7 days a week for me, kind of like a mother figure to these 7 other figures I was using at that time. So CR is her resurrected. W in the heart, as well as Wendy, who I met at that time, after the cosmic scene with Christina and the figures was destroyed by the shadow storm, and I ended up with Wendy, who was the at the time I was 20-something, she was the 30-something hip beach-dwelling, California babe, investigative reporter. And so, but she introduced me to the astrology for the first time. She was an astrologer as well, and that was my first exposure to astrology. Although at the time I had no clue and didn't really get into it. Okay, so then that reality was totally destroyed, and I was thrown back. Now let's see, GSRR. Now what would that stand for? Books? God, I don't even know. Or do I? Oh, Greg and Suzanne is GS. It's not books, it's green because of the Greg-Suzanne connection. And RR is the final return of Ross in late 93, leading to him, him and I opening up the doors leading into the past. Okay, in 1984. We had 3 doors into the past, 2 of my pasts, 1 of his. Right? First, we opened up a door from 1994, where we were, into 1990, at the close of Nuog, before everything went wrong. That reality proceeded until it would evolve naturally into a 1991. A couple of months evolved, because we opened it up in December of 90, so it evolved into January, early February of 91. Then, we opened up a second past of mine, so we had 2. Both of them now 1991s. And, at the same time, we opened up a door into Ross's past when he was a vampire. And then Ross and I made the trade. I gave him one of my 1991 realities to use. We had turned it into the Satanic Castle, where we were doing terrible S&M satanic things. And he gave me his vampire body to use. And I got to experience the vampire. And I quickly burned out and abused power and just went insane with it. It's a bloody, terrible thing. But that all was my first experience with true multidimensionality, because I had 4 separate timelines I was bouncing back and forth between, plus a 5th reality here in the UFO. Ross had constructed the Abraxas ship, which was built out of Hotel Al-Anon. Now, what's Hotel Al-Anon, you ask? That is the astral hotel coexistent with the plates, our first set of plates. When we created our first set of cosmic plates, similar to these cosmic plates you see here, right? Each one of these plates is essentially a room in a hotel, let's say. In this more evolved version with these plates, let's zero in on one of them, for example. Zarathos here, for example. We see that there's an arch over his shoulder leading into a structure. And that would be the room in the memory palace where his content would be contained, right? But at this early stage, Hotel Al-Anon, it was an astral plane scenario, and each room was a different box of the chart, let's say. But that was destroyed in 1991 with the Amber War. So what Ross did, he opened up the first door from 94 to a period at the end of 90 when Hotel Al-Anon was at the height of its power. It had just been created, yet was not destroyed, because it actually only existed for about 1 month in its height. And then the Amber War came to a close, cosmic figures began to linger for a few more months, it was finally destroyed. So there was that 1 prime month from the end of 90 to early 91 when Hotel Al-Anon was first born, up and running, cosmic forces pumping through it like a vast engine. Okay? Ross then took that, transformed it in 1994 into a mobile version, a UFO. Okay? The astral plane UFO. And, then he made his assault, let's say, on the 5th dimension, which was his final scheme for power. Okay.
What a guy.
Okay? And that resulted in him breaking out of the state he was in. He succeeded in breaking to the next level, but lo and behold, he just ended up trapped in the ghost capital over here. He didn't even know it at that point. That's what would happen. Why? Because Carl Jung had been watching him the entire time. Right? And Carl Jung had been systematically undermining Ross the entire time. So he could never succeed. And he would just perpetuate a plot level that Jung was puppeteering all along.
I see.
Ross didn't know that at the time, though. Okay? But here...
Too arrogant.
And, we didn't know either. So it was just Jung's behind everything at this point. We don't know that yet, though. Back to 1994, because of this multiple reality function of my consciousness, I make contact with the faceless man, which is me, the highest dimension me, the faceless man. Dun, dun, dun. In other words, the head of the faceless man is the all-seeing eye, the five-dimensional point. And that was the peak. That you can look at now, a whole 10-year period, let's say, from 84 to 94, that contains the full cycle of awakening, initially, with a double-headed bird and my astral projection and meeting Ross and Kaimane, etc., going through an evolution of multiple traumas and changes and initiations until I finally become the master myself of my own small-scale world, the cosmic cult, which then produces my definitive map of the higher level, the chart, which I then am able to use to manipulate realities and further expand my awareness leading up to the confrontation slash synthesis with the faceless man. And at some point, I'll have to tell you the whole story of how that all unfolded. Not now, obviously. Following this, 1995 sees me inhabit the world of martial arts and the secret S&M and a completely mundane scenario where I was hibernating from the cosmic. Processing, you know. Had to get a break. Literally, you know. Can't take so much. Greg disappeared from my life in 94. That's when he robbed the casino and fled south to where? New Orleans.
Oh.
Yeah, of course.
The best place to go then.
Ended up trapped, of course, being some, indentured servant to some guy. That's how he ended up in jail, prison, eventually on trial for the thing. Blah, blah, blah. So anyway, 94 really was my end of the old cosmic. I consider the old cosmic proper to flow from 84, meeting Ross, all the way to 94, meeting the faceless man. That's the cycle. 95 is the S&M martial arts segue. Leading into 96, the K in the heart obviously is Kimberly, my second serious attempt at romance. But, of course, who's looming in the background now for the first time? CGJ. And that's Jung. Okay? And what's happening now is that in 96, after I finally burn myself out with this crazy S&M world and the martial arts world, these are all my S&M tools, I have the lightning strike of the Lyme disease, which knocks me out of that reality. It's destiny intervention, and it's Carl Jung again, and we see the Aten here, with the hand puppeteering various things, including that lightning strike. That's the idea of the Eye of Ra, the Aten, the higher level fifth dimensional consciousness. And at that time, in late 96, I began to suspect that Jung was one mask being used by that consciousness, and of course I was correct. Okay, and what we see here is a whole tapestry of cosmic symbolism that comes into focus at this time. Leading up, it all starts essentially with this. This is the next form of the double-headed duality bird that I confronted, which was the weighing of the conscience, the scales. On the left is your heart, or your ego mask, your life. On the right, the feather of the law. And if you have the heart heavier, you're consumed. If the feather is heavier, you're in heaven with Osiris and Isis. But if they balance, Sebek appears. And this is where I first saw Sebek, even though I didn't know who he was at that time, in 97, during these encounters mystically with the cosmic figures. Because at Jung's instigation, Jung began visiting me in dreams in late 96. I began to take seriously the Egyptian formulas and start to use them in a more traditional sense, focusing on Isis and the weighing of the conscience. And here, we see my other obsession at that time, which was trying to complete Jung's vision of the hyperspace geometry. And I did that through my knowledge of the formula here, 3 minus 1 plus 2 equals 4. 1 is the present, 2 is the future, 3 is the past, 4 is eternity.
Wow.
Right?
You came up with that?
I came up with that. 1 is the sphere that we see here in the center, of the jewel. Okay? One surface, a sphere. The cone is two surfaces, the flat and then the conic thing. And you see the point of light at the top of the cone. Again, it's coming down from the Aten, and that expands out into like a projection of light, which hits the sphere and then creates the shadow, which is the cylinder, or three-sided shape. Okay, right? It has a top and a bottom, and then the cylindrical meat, right? And that represents the shadow of the past. The present is the sphere where you are in the hyperspatial superposition, the quiff unpopped. The light of consciousness shines on it, creating the cone, and then the popped quiff appears as the pepperoni type slices of the shadow as it accumulates behind you, or underneath you rather. That's why 3 is minus, because it's underneath the 1. 2 is plus because it's above the 1. The cone is above the sphere is above the cylinder. And this is also the Dune Muad'Dib mythos, because the worm is the sphere. Muad'Dib is the worm rather is the cylinder. Muad'Dib, the prophet himself, is the sphere, and then the cone is his prophetic vision, his visionary eye, let's say. And all this is contained within the jewel, right? And that was also influenced by Zelazny and his idea of the jewel of judgment, which the Amberites had. And by having this jewel, they could control the weather, and they could control not only the weather of whether or not it's going to rain, but the weather of how the tides of reality are going to flow. Kind of like the ring in Tolkien. You know, the premise of the ring is that you can control the flow of events, success or failure. Jung at this time also delivers to me in a dream the Abraxas magic square. And he first delivers it through a dream involving Wendy, who I associated with the astrology. And Abraxas was in the form of the clock, right? The 13 letters drawn from the 12 letters of the clock going around the clock. A at the top, S at the bottom, Abraxas going down, Saxarba going back up, and that derives the magic square, the 7 letters of the magic square. And that, 7 words rather, of the magic square. And that really lit my fire, because then I had a tool to really seriously get into the astral projection and the visionary dialogues. And that's when I began to understand the homuncular house, right? 5-dimensional point on top, ascension to it, the pyramid, ascension to the pyramid through the square underneath. At that time also I read HBHG, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and it kicked off a synchronicity stream of goddess information, starting with Isis and the scales and all that, leading into Cleopatra and Mary Magdalene, which we see here. And they're like the goddess forces I came in contact with as a result of my purification that Jung gave me through the symbolism. I stepped up to the cosmic collective level as opposed to the personal cosmic level back here, which is why this is more orderly and it's about beauty and perfection. And the Mary Magdalene, year 2000, Cosmic Trigger is the book there, CT. Robert Anton Wilson's Cosmic Trigger, which gave me the understanding of the Illuminati for the first time. May 5th, 2000, and that entire multiple plot level unfolded, where it was a harmonious, let's say, collective starting gun being fired for year 2000, leading up, as we know now, into 2012. And let's see what else is happening here. With the goddess contacts, particularly Cleopatra, see, I was technically still with Kimberly during this whole period, from 96 to 2000, but our relationship essentially died as soon as Carl Jung came on the picture at the end of 96. So it was only like a good year, let's say, with Kimberly and I, when she nursed me back to health at the end of 96. And then I was with her, but not really with her. And my whole real passion and romance was for these goddess figures. Cleopatra, I was more in love with Cleopatra than I ever was with Kimberly. And I had more of a romantic attraction for the Mary Magdalene priestess figure than I ever did for any other woman in my life to that point. And of course, this taxed me, and then the May 5th alignment really was a cosmic fire drill that made me call into focus and say, look, what am I seriously doing here? And of course, as soon as I started asking those questions, things with Kimberly and I quickly deteriorated. And here we have the bloody destruction of that. The lightning strike, which is my realization that it was over in the year 2000. But now, that freed me. And I began to investigate the Illuminati, and I began to have the ghost capital visions, which is what we see here. Ross actually returned briefly because it was revealed that Jung had imprisoned him in the ghost capital. What is the ghost capital? Built by Peter the Great to house the Cosmic Congress, which is the determining body that will vote for which plan we hand off to the space gods. And as to all the space gods and stuff like that, we're going to record a conversation this weekend that will cover all that. Right now I'm just going to finish battling out this timeline. A99 we see here, Agent 99 Lynn, obviously, at the end of 2001. And that's the last, that kind of positive relationship with her really healed me of the pain of the Kimberly breakup. So that's another form of the duality that we see in 2001. Right? On the left, the negative end, and the right, the new beginning. But that quickly became just the friendship, and things segued into something here with Star. We see a star inside the heart there, a little tiny star.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Star.
Yeah, there she is. Star, the girl I had met at Illuminalc. Oh yeah, I created Illuminalc, Illuminati Alchemy, my internet group, in 2001 as a web to draw in figures to help me investigate the Illuminati. That's how I met Agent 99 and Star. And it led me into the Yahoo world, which then allowed me to find you. See the huge bee with the big heart? That's
Yeah.
Barbara. Barunka, my true love. And the star here, the big one with the eye on top, is the big destiny intervention leading into you and my marriage. And Freemasonry. Queen Rania, I haven't forgot her. It's just that, I haven't figured out how I wanted to represent her in the timeline, so I ended up never representing her in the timeline. I couldn't figure out.
See, she's not even there.
She's above it all. I couldn't figure out a way to represent her, so I just ended up not doing it. It's terrible. But anyway, Freemasonry at that time, 2002. My contacts with Mr. Smith, Joseph Smith, the Mormon prophet, all this, etc. Okay, see, it's actually, it's getting on 10 o'clock, so we're not going to do the big question and answer on the Spiral Odyssey this time. We will do that next time, okay? And we'll also do the Little People dialogue and the final Space Gods timeline. Yeah, we'll do it piece by piece. Tonight we just covered my personal timeline. Anyway, what we could say here is that at the end in 2003, after Freemasonry and my marriage to you comes on the scene, it's revealed that I actually have graduated now to becoming a cosmic figure, fully becoming one with the ancient Egyptian god Sebek, who it turns out is my cosmic face at this time. And I contact myself, Sebek contacts Steve, and puts him on the Spiral Odyssey with the spirit of Queen Rania, and Mary the Apocalypse Child, and the whole cast of characters. And this here represents that Spiral Odyssey, and that is where we will pick up in our next dialogue, talking about that and how it may or may not relate to all the other parts of the timeline that we have seen here. So, summing up then, what we see with my cosmic timeline is a complete set of symbols encapsulating the significant flow of my individual reality for 20 years, leading up to the apotheosis of my marriage and the new era, etc. And I have all the essential elements, I think. I'll have to...
I think you explained it really well.
Yeah, I think that now, by listening to this, watching this on TV, and making notes, I'll have whatever final pieces I need. Final thoughts that'll come to me now that I've seen this whole thing. And, we'll see what happens in the future for my revelatory madness. But for now, I'm just going to sign off by focusing on Isis and Wonder Woman, Nefertiti, and Hathor. particularly, Hathor.
The breast bit.
Oh.
I noticed that.
And signing off.